All right, guys, we're going to go over the disassembly, nomenclatures, and the reassembly of a G19. This one's a Gen 3. And then what I'm also going to do at the end of this video, I'm going to show you a 3D animated program that goes over all of it and shows you how it works together, okay? You may need some punches. Mine's broken in enough. I just need a multi-tool. I might use these tweezers here more than likely, and an Allen wrench, okay? Get any ammunition away from the work area, load of magazines, clear and safe, okay? So this little bar right here is called your slide lock, okay? It works together. And what you'll notice is I've already pressed my pins out a little bit to make this video a little bit quicker, all right? So with the slide, pull back slightly. I'm gonna pull the slide lock down and I'm gonna hold it. Release the slide and pull the trigger, and it's going to separate or release the slide from the frame, okay? So you have 3 pins: your locking block pin, your trigger housing pin, and then trigger pin or trigger housing pin, okay? When you knock these out, they need to be knocked out from the right side to the left. From what I understand, the frame itself is tapered, okay? So if we try to knock them out from left to right, it's going to waller the holes out and the pins are going to be a lot looser and more susceptible to falling out, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and knock these out. What I would recommend you get is a magnetic bowl. Pretty cheap. It's going to save you a lifetime of pain when you get into this stuff and you start losing parts, okay? Your trigger housing pin, you're going to have more issues with this one. All right, this lever, slide lock, slide release. All right, some people call it your slide stop lever. You may have to wiggle this back and forth to get that bottom pin out, okay? And as you can see, this pin has some grooves in it, and it doesn't always fit perfectly. So if it's sitting up against your slide lock or slide release, you're trying to hammer it out, you're gonna have some issues, okay? You can take some pliers and pull your locking block out. What I like to do, if you're gonna do this, you need to be very easy. Again, my gun's broken in, so I can do this. I'm just gonna do it until it creates a space. I'm gonna take my screwdriver and just simply pry the locking block out. This should free the entire trigger assembly. So you have your trigger bar, and then you have your trigger housing. And then we have the connector and connector spring. You can take these apart to clean them if you want. I would just leave it like that. So for a field cleaning, or just a good cleaning, that's all you really need to do, but there's 2 more pieces I'm gonna show you how to take apart, just in case you wanna upgrade some parts, okay? Your slide lock, if you look right here, there's this thin bar that moves up and down. This is your slide lock spring. So the top of your slide lock, what we're gonna do is we're gonna depress this spring down far enough that the slide lock, the top of it, drops below this part right here, and we can push it out left or right. When you do this, I would highly recommend you keep pressure on that spring, because it's going to want to pop out, okay? So I'm going to put pressure on the spring, not a lot. I'm going to take my nail on the inside and I'm going to push it. Release the spring. And if you look right here, that little groove is where that spring sets in, okay? So I'm going to take these tweezers. This is a pretty tough piece of metal, but you don't want to bend it. That 90 degrees is what goes in the downward position. If you look down inside the magazine well, okay, for your mag release, there's a little bar, fairly thinner than this, and it sits just like this, and it's bent. All right? That's your mag release spring. All right. To get it out, it's got to go this direction and then pop out of the groove that it's in. Okay. There we go. All right, you push the magazine release from left to the right. And that is a completely disassembled frame, again, except for the flashlight and the magazine well. Okay. For the slide, we have our recoil spring. Got your barrel. What you're going to notice, if you look right here, this is part of your firing pin, okay? And it moves back and forward. But if you look right in front of your firing pin, you're going to see a little black sleeve, okay? And what we need to do is we need to take an Allen wrench or something, and we're going to push or compress the spring that's in here. That's going to release the back plate. So I'm going to push this part down. Take my thumb, push forward, and I'm just going to keep my thumb over this as I remove it. There's a spring in there. It's more than likely not going to flip out. All right, back plate comes off. Your firing pin assembly. If you look right here, this is referred to as your extractor depressor plunger and your extractor depressor spring, okay? The next piece that comes out is going to be your extractor, also known, for those of you who have shot with us so far, is the loaded chamber indicator on the outside. That'll just come out. All right, this right here is referred to as your firing pin safety, and what's below it, firing pin safety spring. Sometimes it'll come out fairly easy. If it's dirty, you got to turn it upside down and tap. But you want to be careful because that spring does come out and it does come loose every now and then. And that's one of those parts that it's not easy to replace. You pretty much have to buy a kit for it, okay? So the slide itself is disassembled. All right, your firing pin assembly comes in basically 4 pieces. You got your firing pin that slides down here, 90 is out. You got your firing pin coupling or sleeve, got your firing pin spring, and now we have our firing pin, these are retaining caps, okay? So as I push this spring down, right, it's not one piece, it's 2 halves. What you'll notice, if you let that spring go, you're gonna have a serious mess on your hands because you're not gonna be able to find them. That's giving me trouble tonight. There we go. All right. Spring comes out. This is what the caps look like, all right? So if you look at the firing pin, how the shaft is smaller right here, that is what the cap rests on. And when you put this back together, sometimes since you have so many moving parts right here, the caps and everything are just bound together. You think you have it together and you let go of that spring, and then the spring forces, flings the caps into the middle of nowhere. And again, you're gonna be in a serious struggle to find parts, okay? So take your firing pin, your coupling. Now, what you'll notice is if I set this here, the firing pin wants to fall down. And because I'm losing height, that means I'm gonna have to compress this spring further, and it's gonna be stronger or harder to push down. This is, I think it's probably 4.5 pound spring, something like that. 5.5 to 6.5 is stock. So it's a pain in the butt. So you might have to take a slide or something and put the firing pin on the edge while you pull it down and put your caps, okay? That works fairly good. I like to hold it in my hand as well. Doesn't really matter as long as you can get it there. I'm going to try this since I told you you could do it that way. Okay, so you're going to take a half a cap, drop it in between the spring and the shaft. All right, as you can see, I still have my fingers around these caps. All right, like I said, I want to rotate just a little bit. Just make sure I don't feel any snapping or popping. All right, where it release. Okay, firing pin is, assembly is put back together. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take your extractor and the firing pin safety, put those in first. So if you see this little worn out area right here, what you'll notice is that sits like so. So this plunger, your firing pin safety can't come out. So I'm going to put the firing pin safety in first. All right, and what I'm looking for here is just smooth motion up and down. If you have any restrictions, sometimes that spring gets cocked sideways or it falls out and you're gonna have a lot of restriction, all right? So I'm gonna push the firing pin safety down to make the grooves visible. All right. And I'm gonna take the loaded chamber indicator, the protruding part, and that's gonna go to the forward position, okay? I'm gonna let it go. Then I can take the extractor depressor plunger and the spring. The spring is going to go back towards the back plate, all right? So go just like that. I'm gonna take the firing pin assembly, put it into place. So then you grab your back plate. Just putting mild pressure in this direction. So I have to compress the spring here. So I'm gonna push down while I'm pushing forward on the plate. And now I have to push the extractor depressor plunger spring down and do the exact same thing. And what you're gonna feel eventually is a little click and you'll hear it pop, all right? The two freely moving parts are gonna be your firing pin safety and your firing pin. Right? If it hangs up or doesn't move freely, then there's something wrong with it, all right? So we're gonna take our barrel, our recoil spring. If you look on your barrel, almost every barrel has a couple steps, all right? One step is flat, the other step is, quarter moon. That is where, all right, your recoil spring is going to lie, on that very bottom. Right. So your slide is put back together. Right. So we're going to take the magazine release, and what you're going to notice, I don't know if you can see it, that bar is actually pressed up against the front of the grip right now. So as I put the magazine release in, I can't just shove it in there. I'm going to can it sideways slightly. And then I have to go in here and pull that magazine release spring out so the magazine release button can slide past it, okay? Like I said, the hardest part of this, if you've got a decent tool, is just getting some good quality light down inside there. Be able to see it. Okay. All right, once it snaps into place, the spring is still going to be in the straight or the vertical position. It needs to go that direction, meaning bend, and then snap back into its original position or its resting place. And you can see it. Okay. I want to make sure that it's functional. Okay. Now I'm going to take the slide lock spring. Don't hold the 90 in your hand. I'm going to lay it into that little bitty hole right there. Okay. I'm just going to kind of let it free float and push it down with my hand. All right. So now I'm going to take the slide lock, and all I have to do to put it back in is to depress the spring and allow the slide lock to snap into place. So here's what I would recommend on this. Instead of trying to shove it straight in, go at an angle as such, and I'm going to be pushing it up slightly. All right, and once it clears, that spring is going to go right over the top like it was nothing. All right. Two things you're looking for: it won't move back and forth, and also we have spring in it as well. Okay. Next, we're going to take a trigger assembly. The only thing you really need to focus on here is try to make your trigger bar under the connector. Okay, just hold your housing. Doesn't have to be perfect. Insert the housing, and the trigger should line up and go into place. So we're going to take now the locking block. Go ahead and grab your slide stop lever. When you put this back in, the spring here, the top of this spring is going to rest right under the locking block. If you try to put it in a hooking manner, this is going to catch under the bottom of the locking block, and it's going to bend and it's going to tear it up. Okay. Now at this point, I'm going to take the trigger pin, and keep in mind that I've got the locking block, the slide lock lever, the trigger, and the frame. So I've got roughly 4 components and holes that I need to line up. And what you're going to notice as well, I'm not beating it in. Next, as long as it's catching on this side, I'm not going to tap it all the way in just yet, just in case something's not working properly. I don't have to rip pins back out. All right, so locking block pin. And slightly tap, it shouldn't take that much. And then the trigger pin or trigger housing pin. All right. This one you can put back in all the way if you like. It's not that hard to take out. Okay. So I can pull the trigger forward, and it should reset on its own. I can pull it, and the trigger drops, simulating that the firing pin will drop. Okay. So basically, I'm going to go over this real quick. You have 3 safeties. The first safety, or where you've got 3 safety mechanisms. The first safety is right here, the trigger safety. Okay, as you pull the trigger, okay, as you pull the trigger, this part of the trigger bar actually pushes up on the firing pin safety, which allows the firing pin to slip past that hourglass portion of your firing pin safety, okay? Next, your firing pin is resting right here. So as I begin to pull this trigger back, if you look on the housing, all right, the housing is set roughly at a 45. If you're looking at it sideways, it comes back and then it drops. So this cross is on the top portion now, and as you pull the trigger back, here's the firing pin, setting like this. It drops below the firing pin, and the firing pin springs forward. We're going to go over this on a 3D animated program. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of how it works, okay? Let's go ahead and put it back together. And we're going to do a function check, okay? I still haven't knocked the pins in. Function check is I'm going to take some type of tool, and I don't want to activate the safety. The only reason I'm going to activate the safety is make sure it's springing backward, that the spring is not broke. That actually happens. So now I'm going to pull on the trigger itself and make sure the safety is stopping on the frame and doing what it's supposed to. Believe it or not, I've seen people pull on a trigger in this manner, okay? So they're not activating the safety, so they're pulling really, really hard, and eventually the safety is activated. But the back of the safety here has so much pressure on it that the safety wears out fairly quickly, and they don't even know it, and the safety is not even operational. It still works because the trigger itself works, but it's a false sense of security. Okay, so next, go ahead and pull the trigger, make sure the firing pin drops, and hold the trigger back. Cycle, release. Okay, we want to see that the trigger is going to reset. It resets. Go ahead and pull it one more time. And you shouldn't feel any more restriction than you normally do. All right. Next, pull your slide back, use your slide lock, now use your slide release. See that it goes home. Now I would recommend that if you have an empty magazine, use it. Don't use a loaded one. All right, just to make sure it inserts, locks, and your magazine release will release, okay? At no point would I recommend you bypassing a function check. If it's a range gun, a little pew-pew gun, that's different. If it's a CCW home defense gun, just do that basic function check. It's going to give you a good indicator that everything's operational. The only thing that it will not tell you is if the tip of the firing pin's damaged and it's giving you light strikes on the ammo, or if there's something wrong with the ammo. If it does what it just did, it's going to go bang, okay?
All right, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide some of the parts here. I'm going to hide the slide. I'm going to hide the frame. I'm going to hide the barrel. All right, and I'm going to make the trigger housing transparent. I'm going to get rid of, actually, I'm going to make the trigger transparent. I'm going to get rid of the magazine. All right, the locking block is here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. All right, the slide stop is right here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. A magazine catch. Here's the spring, the long bar we were talking about that's in the grip. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Okay, so that what I wanted to show you here is exactly how the safety features work. If you remember, I said there were 3. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. All right, so this is in the reset position. Okay, you've got the trigger safety, you've got your trigger bar, okay, your firing pin safety, I'll call it a plunger. And if you remember, we were talking about the cross back here, how it holds the firing pin, that 90-degree portion of the firing pin. And as the trigger is pulled back, it basically slips off this 45-degree slope and allows a firing pin to bypass. Okay, so if something happens and this breaks and this firing pin slips past, unless this part of the trigger bar has pushed the plunger up, the firing pin can't slip past to strike the round. So again, there's 3 safety features: the trigger safety, the plunger, firing pin safety, as well as this particular safety back here. Okay, so basically how it works, we pull the trigger bar begins moving back all together, so the plunger is pushed up at the exact same time this begins falling off this slope. So it's going to allow this hourglass portion to slip up. The firing pin will be able to bypass it. All right. So all this happens together. I'm going to hit play. Triggers pulled, plungers pushed up, drops off, firing pin bypasses, round is struck. Kind of cycled. Trigger is getting ready to be reset. Okay. And then it continues on.